Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. In the previous video we learned about file handling. We learned how we can open a file, how we can read, write, edit, append. We also learned how we can get the position and stick to a particular position. We also learned about multiple way of opening a mode in multiple mode. Then at the end we learned what is the best way to open a file using the with keyboard. I hope you got all the concept of file handling from the previous video. If you're facing any problem, then you can comment in the comment section. I'll try to solve it. We also have a Telegram group for discussion. You can join the group and ask any question or post any screenshot if you want help with getting started with any part of Python that we learned till today. In today's video, we'll be learning about error handling. Before starting error handling, let's look at why we will need it. Suppose you have a very large script, okay? Then you have something called say print name. Now here this name should be a variable, right? But we did not define a variable. So what do you think when I run this, what will get printed? So this should say like this name does not exist, right? So let's run this. Python 15. See, it throws an error, right? Similarly like this, if something like this existed in a very large project where it's on the where the users are using it, you don't want such thing to crash their whole program, right? So suppose this part is not even part of the larger scope of the script, it's just one part of it, and you don't want for something like this a big project should be messed up, right? So that is where the error handling comes, and it handles such cases and makes the script to not crash in the middle and work smoothly. So today we'll be learning how we can handle all this and how not having a name like this also will not throw an error, but it will run the script how it is supposed to run. So to learn about error handling, there are two keywords that you should know. One is try and one is except. Okay, what this try keyword does is like it will say try to do this. Suppose we wanted to print this name, okay, try to print this, and except says if it fails then execute this. So let me show you an example. Suppose the same thing like the print name, okay, we can do try, put a colon, then come down and put an indentation, okay. So it's like a function. Try is like a function. You put the colon, then you come down and put an indentation and write whatever you want. Suppose we are here print name. Now after try, you need to put the except block. So you need to add except and put exception. exception. Here this exception, this is a best function for the default built-in errors. Okay. So this you cannot write it small e or anything. You need to write in the proper way like capital E exception. Okay. Then you can put a colon. And now you put an indent and you can do something like, you can say name is not defined or something, any message you can put, okay, name is not defined. Now if you run this, see earlier we got error for this print name, right? We got an error that name is not defined. Now if you run this, see this time you did not get this error, but you got name is not defined. So that is what the base of error handling is. So we handle the errors like this error. We know that the error may be coming for this, but what do we do if we face this error? So use the except block, put an exception, then we can print what the error was or whatever we wanted to say why this error was caused. Okay, so when we do this, right, it will not stop the total script. It will give a user something to know like why it did not run. Suppose now if you wanted to know like what this error was, okay, suppose you don't know what this error was, then you can put this exception in a variable called e. Suppose se, okay, when you say s, it will just assign whatever the exception was in this e. Now if you print this, okay, now you can print this e. If you print this e, you should be getting why this error was called. If you run this, see, you get the error name is not defined. How did this come from? In the previous one, first time, right, when you throw error, you can see it produced a name error, then it says name is not defined. So here we can get the message like why this error was thrown. So this is the base of how error handling works in Python. We put a try keyword, put all our things that may or may not fail. We want to make it proof that it does not fail and does not stop the script. And then with the exception, this is called exception. Okay, we put the except keyword, write the keyword exception exception where the e is kept. And if you want to put it in a variable, you can write s and the name of the variable. Then you can print out or do anything that you want for controlling this error. Okay, so this is the base of how you can do this. Now there is one more keyword called, suppose after this error, right, you wanted to if even if it passed or failed, you don't care. After this is done, you need to print something. Okay, then you can use one more keyword called finally. What this finally will do, it will not care if this true case, if this failed or it did not fail. It will always run after this try block ran, right? It will always run this. So you can say like this, print finally to the end. Now if you run this, see, you will get this line finally to the end. So finally is one more keyword that you can attach to your try block. It is like a extra bit what you want to do even after if this error was not even there. Okay, suppose we have defined name is equal to, suppose in the try block we have name equals to let's code together. Okay, now if you run this, now you get let's code together, right? You did not get this name is not defined, right? And but you still got this finally to the end. Why? Because this finally keyword will always get executed. It will not depend if this try gets failed or not failed. It will always be there. Similar like this, there is also one keyword called else. Okay, so let's put this finally here. Let's keep it here. Let's copy everything once again, comment this out and put it here. Now instead of finally, there is one more called else. So how else works? If this try is successful, right, then this else will work. If this try failed, then this else will not work. Let's see. Okay, else worked. Now if you run this, see, now you get let's code together and this else worked. Why? Because it did not fail, right? If it failed, we'll be getting this, like name is not defined. Now if you comment out this and now run this, see, this time you get name is not defined, but you did not get else worked. Why? Because if this try block fails, right, then the exception block gets executed, but the else block does not get executed. But when there is finally, right, it does not care if it failed in the try block or anything or printed in the except. It will always run after the try block complete. Try and exception block completes, right? Then finally will always run. So let's put a comment here. This always runs regardless of fail case. Okay, and this else, how it works is, it runs if there is no error in the try block. Okay, so these are the base of how error handling works in Python. Now let's come to different type of error that can happen in Python. Okay, so there are different ways of Python. One we have learned is this one, the name here. This is called name error. First is name error. What is name error? This occurs if the variable is not defined. So this error can happen like in the just now what we saw, right? This one, when you do print of name and run this, see, we get this name error. So this is part of name error. And if you want to handle only this case, right, only you want to handle only this name error, what you can do? You can do something like the previous one. You can do try print name and put the except. Here we won't write exception. This exception is a base class. Okay, let's put it here. Exception is the base class of built-in error. So this is used when we don't know what the error type can be. Okay, so this exception that you use after except, like this exception, this is a base class for built-in. We'll learn about a class from the next class. Okay, so this is a base class for built-in errors, like we have this name error and the one we'll be learning after this, right? So when you don't know like what is the error that is coming, then you can use this word exception. But if you know, right, then you can put something like this, name error. Se, the name can be anything. Okay, the variable after s you pass, then you can print here print e, or you can write print name is not defined. In the exception block you can put anything that you want the user should know what this error happened. Now if you run this, See, we get name is not defined, name is not. We can to print because we printed out two things. So that is part of name errors. So this occurs if the variable is not defined. Here the name variable, right? This is not defined, right? That's why you get this error. Now there is one more called type error. Okay, these are some of the built-in errors that are in Python. Okay, then we have type error. Type error. So in the type error, what we can do? Let's make one more try except block. Try except block. Okay, we'll do print. So in the exception, we know what is the exception type. This time it is type error. So we'll write type error. So what a type error? Type error is when you try to do something that does not match the type. Okay, suppose we know we cannot add a number and a string, right? So if you try to do something like this, so this is like adding this. One is a number, right? And ABC is a string. Now if you try to, this will not match, right? This is because there is a difference in type of it. This is a type of int, but this is a type of string. So now if you run this, so you'll get this error: unsupported operand plus int and string. But if you did not use this try except block, right, this should have thrown an error and you will get to know the type of it. So now if you run this, see, you'll get this error called type error. If you see in this terminal, right, you'll say type error, unsupported operand. But if you don't want to throw an error like this, right, then you can use this try block. So this is what a type error is. Type error is means when two types are unsupported type, like when you try to add or subtract something from one is a number and one is not a number, then you get this type of error. One more error is called key error. So it's called key error. So key error is like when you work with dictionary, like when you don't use the get function. We have used get function, but if you don't use get function, we know that if that key is not found, right, it will throw an error. So let's define one dictionary. dict1 equals to 1 and we'll say any1. Here there is only one key called 1, but now if you try to print 2, okay, but we know 2 is not part of this dictionary, right, because we have only one key that is 1 and that says 1, but we don't have 2. But what if you wanted to do for 2, dict1 and you do 2? So what do you think this will? This will throw an error, right? So if you run this, see, we'll get an error called key error and 2. Why? Because 2 is not part of this dictionary. So to avoid this type of case, you can use the key error exception. So how you can do this? You can do something like this. You can do try block here and put this print inside the try block, and in the exception you can write except key error se and print this e or whatever you want to do with this error. Now you should see this will not throw an error, but it will just say this key is missing. So you can do something like this. You can say e, we'll put in the curly braces, so this converted into string, e is missing. Okay, now if you run this, so you'll get 2 is missing. So you won't get this long error like saying this set traceback, you are getting an error. Now let's look at one more type of error that is called division by 0 error. So you know when you divide any number by 0, right? So suppose 1 by 0. You know this is not possible because we cannot divide any number by 0. So what happens if you run this? So now if you run this, you'll see there is one more error called 0 division error. So this 0 division error happens when we try to divide a number by 0. Let's see how we can handle this. So what we can do, we can try, suppose let's take a number, okay. Now we will be doing one more thing. So let's take a number called num1 equals to 10. Num2 will be an input, okay. It's an input, and you know you need to convert an input to numbers using the int wrapper. Then you can just enter a number to divide 10 with, okay. And we'll ask for a number. You have already learned how this input works, right? If you don't know, please watch our previous episodes, you'll learn about it. So now what we'll do, we'll try to divide this number by num2. We'll let print num1 by num2. Now what do you think will happen when we try to put a number here in the number, right? When we put 0, then this will be 10 by 0, right? That is not possible. So let's see what are the possibilities here. So first it will ask for number. Let's put a number called 12, you know, and we'll run 12 by 10. So we'll get something like this. Second time when we run, we put a 0 here. Now you know you cannot divide a number. So here 10 with 0, right? So it will throw an error. There is also one more case. What if we put a string here? Suppose we put ABCD. Now you know when ABCD, if you are wrapping with integer, you cannot convert ABCD to integer, right? So now if you run this, it throws one more error called value error. So here you can see there are multiple errors. So it can either be 0 division error, it can also be value error. So while learning with the zero division error, we will also learning about one more concept called handling multiple errors. Okay, so we'll try to see how we can handle multiple errors. So first, what we can do, we can put this in a try block. So let's put this in a try block. We'll put both of them in a try block. Okay. Now, what are the possible error that can happen from this? We saw there are two possible. One is value error and one is zero division error. So what we can do something like except except, and we can format tuple. You know what tuple is? We can put in parenthesis and put that any element here. So here we'll put two element. One is called zero division error and one is value error. Okay. So that is how you can put multiple error. In the previous we saw we can only put one error, right? So if you want to put multiple error, put a parenthesis and put the error inside. Then you can name anything. You can say SE, and now you can print this A. Now if you run this, let's run this. So first we'll put any number called 12. Yes, it runs properly. If you put any number called 0, see it's a division by 0. So it's throwing an error. It's not showing something like this, right? It will not throw you error like this. It will not crash. The script will not crash. And so if you put something like ABC, and see it says invalid. But here you may be wondering like how do we know what this error is, right? If you wanted to keep a log, so in the previous video we saw about file, right? So if you wanted to keep in a file like what the type of error is, so what you can do something like this. You can do print type of E and you can do dot underscore name. You know everything has a name, right? So you can do name and run this. Now if you run this and put a number like 0, see you will be getting the name of the error. So zero division error. So like this you can say what this type of error is, and you can put the error here also. You can write print A. Now you have both access. You have access to what is the type and what the error is. So these are the two things you'll get access directly. So now if you run this and put 0, so you'll get access like zero division error, and you'll get the what is the message, it is division by 0. So that is how you can handle multiple error exception. Okay, so if you want to accept multiple, then you can format tuple and put the exception here. Now let's say here now there are two things. Okay, one is we learned about else and finally, right? So here we can do this else and finally. We can work with else and finally here. So suppose there is finally. Okay, finally. Now finally runs. Even if this is correct or wrong, it does not matter. It will always run. So suppose we say here 10 by num2. What do you think? Will this throw an error or it will not throw? We handle the exception. Okay, we handle the exception also. Then in the finally we once more did print 10 by num2. What do you think? Will this throw an error? Let's see. Now if you run this and put 0 here, see it still threw an error. Why? Because as I said earlier, finally will always run. It does not matter if this threw an error and it was handled properly. If you do finally will always run after the completion of try and except. So to overcome this, you can use the else block. So let's do one thing. So this is the correct. Okay, so this is the first one. Let's put this here and make this error case. Okay, and let's comment out this. Now if you want to work with this, right, if you wanted to print one more time, here the only possible way is using else case. Why? As I said, else case will only execute if there is no exception in the try block. Now you know this try block has handled everything. So if there is any exception in this try, right, this exception block will be end and this else will never run. So now if you run this and put 0, see you will not get anything. You won't get like the previous one, right? This 3 you will not get in else, because else will only execute if this try was successful. Here the try was not successful, right? If you put 0, 0 is, you can't divide any number with 0, so you will get to this exception. That's why you won't get to else. So you can say working case. So this is the difference between how finally and this else works. Okay, now there is one more way. Now these are all the built-in errors, like we got the value error, name error, key error. This is built-in. Like, but how do you want, if you wanted to raise an error, suppose you wanted to say this is an error. Suppose we have a function called run. Okay, def run, and you wanted to throw an error from here. So you say let's say enter a number. Okay, int, let's put a number num1 equals to integer of input, enter a number. Okay, and you wanted to say like you don't know about, suppose you don't know about zero division error. Now we know, suppose you don't know. Okay, then we'll say if num1 equals to 0, then we wanted to throw an error, saying 0 is not valid. Okay, if you want to throw an error, so you can raise an error like saying like how we did a zero division error, like you want to show something saying that this is not possible, you can't do this. And suppose you run here. Okay, you call this function run, and let's do a pass here. Now if you run this, see, for now it will ask enter a number because this run function is running. If you pass a 0, nothing happens, right? So if you wanted to raise an exception, from our side, so previous one was the built-in, like it happens automatically when you don't have to check for it. But if you wanted to add from outside, what you can do, you can write a keyword called raise. So it says RAISE. Inside the raise, now you can pass any type of error. You can do zero division error, you can pass the value error. Suppose you can say like this, you can say 0 division error, and you can say 0 is invalid. Okay, now if you run this, 0 is invalid. Now let's run this once again, put 0, see, you'll get something like this, 0 is invalid. Previously you're not getting in zero division error, you'll say 0 is not in something, not a number or something. Like let's go to the top and see, let's get some divisible by 0, right? So you can change the message like this, you can say 0 is invalid. Along with this, you also can raise directly, calling something like this, raise. If you don't want to put something like zero division error, right, so that don't look same, you can put exception, exception. I said this is a base class for built-in, right? So you can cite here also. So 0 is not valid. Now if you run this, you should still get this error. Put 0 and see, you'll get an exception and you'll say 0 is not valid. Similarly, now you can handle this using a try block. You can so try and run this, and you can do except. Since you don't know what the exception type can be, right, it can be anything, so you can do exception as a. This is a base class, so you can do print a. Now if you run this, put 0, you'll say 0 is not valid. So that is how we can do in raising our own exception. If you wanted to, based on some condition, if you wanted to say this is not valid, you want to throw an error, you can use this raise keyword. We also can create our own exception, okay, but that will need some understanding of classes that we'll learn from the next class. So after we learn our class, we'll come once more we'll come back to error handling, where we'll talk about how we can create our own exception, so that we don't have to use function like this. We can add any function like 0 invalid case, something, any name you want, you can put, and you can put an exception. But that will need some more complexity for learning how classes and all this work. So when we understand our class properly, we'll come back to this error handling and we'll create our own error. So that was it about error. Let's go back, let's see from the top like what we have learned, so that we can understand in a more clear way. First is error handling. So what is error handling and why we use it? When we want to handle the case, we don't want that if there is an error, the total script should not crash, and the user should at least have some idea like why it crashed. Okay, and what are the keyword that are used with error handling? So these are try, except, there is finally, there is else, and there is one more called raise. Okay, so these are the keywords involved. Okay, so these are the keyword involved in error handling in Python. So what are the keywords? So it's try, except, finally, else, raise. What does a try block do? So it's like a function, okay, try function, except function. So you need to put some indentation, like when we do an if clause, right, we put an indentation. Like for the try block also, you need to put an indentation and put all the cases that you think may fail. And now when you use try, you should use the except. What the except will do, it will, if there is any error, you'll directly be coming to this block. And here, if you want to accept, if you don't know what the error type is, then you can put the exception block. So this is a base class for built-in. You can just put exception and it will handle all the error that will be coming from here. If you want to name any variable, you can do s and you can put the variable name. Okay, then it will you can handle this anyway. You can print it or put it in a log file, make a file and say this was the error that was caught, put the timestamp and all this. And there is one more keyword called finally. What finally is, it will always run. If there is an error, no error, it does not care. Finally will always run after try and accept or completed. Okay, then there is another word called else. So this else will only run if this try block was successful. That means there was no error. So there is a difference between finally and else. Now what are the different type of errors? So we can have name error. Name error happens when the name is not defined. Like if a variable is there but it has no value, we have not defined this anywhere. Then we have type error when we try to do an operation that are of not same type. Like when we try to add one number and one string, right? Then we'll get this type error. And how you can accept. So now if you know this will be of name error, right? Then you can do accept and you can put the name of that error. So suppose this is a name error, right? This is the type of that error. So you can do name error, put in a variable and handle it however you want it to. And there is key error. Key error will happen when you have dictionary, right? And you wanted to get a key which is not part of the dictionary. You can use the key get function in dictionary. This will not throw an error. But if you do using like index wise, right, where you try to put key inside the square braces, then this will throw an error. Then you can use the key error. And there is one more called zero division error. Zero division error happens when we try to divide a number by 0. And in the same way we learned about how we can handle multiple error. So what we can do, we can put them in a tuple. And if you wanted to know what the error was in, you'll put multiple cases here, right? So if you wanted to put an if clause saying that if this is this type of error, then we do something. To get this, then you can use the type a dot underscore name and underscore, then you will get the what is the type. Okay, so this is how you handle multiple case. And here we show an example like how finally and else work with a proper example where we said if a number is divisible by 10, we try to divide again by the num2, but since finally will always happen, so even if it's 0, still you'll run this and you'll throw an error. So to overcome this, we use the else clause. Okay, then we finally came what if we wanted to raise our exception from our side. So these are some of the exceptions that will Python will raise by itself, right? But if you wanted to matching some condition, if you wanted to raise an error, then you can use the raise keyword. So the exception can be all the built-in, and you can put the base condition, base class exception, and put your message in this parenthesis. We also learn how we can create our own error, but that will need classes. When we learn about classes, we will come back here and we will do once again. And similarly, you can do the try except block. So that was all about error handling. It's an easy thing, okay? Just need to add once or twice and you'll understand how it's. At first, it may seem like these are not necessary since you know everything will run properly. But as your code start getting larger, right, you need to make it safe so that when someone is using it, they don't face all this error and they don't know what to do, what to not do. So that's why that's when this try catch will make you useful, and you need to learn about this. Okay, it's easy, but yeah, but getting idea of how this works is very important. Okay, I think that was it. Let's push it to GitHub. We'll do git status and we'll do git add all, git commit, error handling, it's handling, and do git push origin man, git push origin man. It should get pushed to GitHub. Click on this link. Let's see if it got pushed, and it's loading. So the page is refreshed. You go to 15 error handling and you should see all of them. Okay, I think yeah, that was it for today. I hope you understood how error handling works, and yeah, if you have any doubt in error handling or any file handling or any of the classes that we have done till today, okay, it's number 15, so there is already 15 videos up and running. If you have any difficulty, please comment out, or you can join our Telegram discussion group and ask any question, put screenshot. If you have any difficulties, then I'll try to solve it. So yeah, that was it for today. Thank you for watching. See you in the next.